This is the third episode on becoming a world champion in asset recovery, challenges in maintaining public trust in the management and disposal of recovered stolen assets.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this third episode of the Asset Recovery webinar series. Now, us, that is the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the Asset Recovery Interagency Network for West and Central Asia, a network of asset recovery practitioners from countries in the region, hosted by the Law Enforcement Academy of the General Prosecutor's Office of Uzbekistan. My name is Oliver Stolper. I'm the regional representative of UNODC based here in Uzbekistan, and I'm covering the countries of Central Asia, as well as Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan. Now, so far in the webinar series, we have been focusing on how to recover stolen assets. But in today's episode, we will be discussing what we do once the assets have been recovered. And in particular, what do we do to make sure that assets are being used in a manner that is beyond reproach, that we adhere to the highest standards of transparency, accountability, and integrity, and that in the process, we manage to regain and maintain the public trust. To discuss this topic, I'm being joined by Dr. Sayura Godjaeva, Chair of the Civil Society Advisory Council of the Vision 2030 Échange Fund. The Échange Fund was established through a bilateral agreement between Switzerland and Uzbekistan on the return of assets that had been stolen through a variety of corruption schemes by Gulnara Karimova and her associates. The Échange Fund is the vehicle through which these funds are now being returned for the benefit of the people of Uzbekistan. Sayura has a long and distinguished career in civil service and held a variety of functions across the justice sector in Uzbekistan. Today, Sayura is the director of the Institute for Democracy and Human Rights, an NGO that was established in 2015 with the objective of promoting democratic principles and human rights in the exercise of public power by state bodies. Sayura also serves as a deputy of the Tashkent Regional Council. She is a member of the Advisory Council under the President of Uzbekistan and serves as an expert on the Committee on Combating Corruption of the Oli Majlis of the Republic of Uzbekistan, that is the Parliament of Uzbekistan. Now, the other guest that is joining me is my friend Jonas Astrup. He's the head of the Secretariat of the Vision 2030 Échange Fund, which is established under the Resident Coordinator's Office of the United Nations in Uzbekistan. Previously, Jonas led the International Labour Organization's third-party monitoring project, which contributed to historic reforms in Uzbekistan by assisting government in removing 2 million children from child labor and 500,000 adults from forced labor. Before joining the United Nations, Jonas worked in the private sector as well as at the International Chamber of Commerce. My third guest is Mr. Peter Maduoma. He is the acting director of the Clean Foundation, a Nigerian civil society organization that has been contracted to monitor the use of $312 million that have been recovered from the Abacha loot. According to a tripartite agreement between the countries involved in that recovery, namely Nigeria, the United States, and the Bailiwick of Jersey, these funds are to be used to co-finance 3 major infrastructure projects of the federal government of Nigeria. Prior to becoming the acting director of the Clean Foundation, Peter led the civil society monitoring of the implementation of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act in Nigeria. He was also in charge of projects aimed to reduce the trust deficit between the public and security agencies in Nigeria, an area in which the Nigerian Police Force, UNODC, and the Clean Foundation have been working together for some years. Now, before handing over to my guests, let me quickly give you some background. The whole notion that assets stolen by politically exposed persons should be recovered and returned to the countries of origin is still a rather young principle in international law. It was mainly informed by cases emerging in the 90s when a number of heads of states and their families had amassed mind-boggling amounts of personal wealth while condemning large parts of their population to live in poverty. Many of us will still remember the obscene wealth that people like Fernando Marcos, Suharto, Alberto Fujimori, or Pavlo Lazarenko had amassed while in power. And of course, we dedicated our entire first episode of the Asset Recovery webinar series to the hunt for the infamous Abacha loot. The abuse of office was so extensive that we had to create a new term to describe that level of corruption. So the looters and their associates started to be referred to as kleptocrats. These cases did not only motivate the affected countries to seek to recover the immense wealth that had been misappropriated and often stashed away in the financial centers of this world, but they also started to push for changes in international law. In particular, they advocated for the introduction of two notions, namely, that corruption is not a victimless crime and that the proceeds of corruption belong to those who have suffered the consequences of corruption. This advocacy gained traction and eventually led to the inclusion of asset recovery and asset return as fundamental principles in the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, adopted in 2003 by the UN General Assembly. Now, not too long after the adoption of the convention, we started to see the first large-scale asset recovery cases emerging, and with them, a new problem, namely a massive trust deficit. A deficit which existed and continues to exist at multiple levels and which affects both the recovery as well as the return and the use of stolen assets. Now let's look at that trust issue a little closer. First, there's the distrust of the people in the country where the assets have been looted. They fear that the money will be stolen again. This is a concern that is often shared by the authorities as well as the citizens in the countries who are returning the stolen assets. And at the same time, there's a suspicion by governments and the people in the countries seeking the recovery of assets that there's a reluctance to return the assets, as well as a reluctance to hold those accountable who were complicit in the looting, namely financial institutions and other interlocutors. A suspicion that is further fueled by lengthy mutual legal assistance procedures, as well as long negotiations about the return and the use of assets, as well as by the apparently mildness of actions taken against financial institutions and bankers involved in the laundering of the looted assets. Now, in short, it turned out that you cannot legislate trust. You have to earn it. And how to exactly do that in the context of the management and disposal of recovered assets is the tasks of my guests today. So now that we have set the scene, let me first turn to you, Peter. Can you give us an overview of the arrangements that have been created to manage the disposal of the third international Abacha loot return? And I would be particularly interested in the practical steps you have been taken to instill public trust in the proper management and disposal of the 312 million US dollars that were returned by the US government and by Jersey. Over to you, Peter.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone from Nigeria, and then from anywhere you are joining. I hope you can hear me very clearly. Yeah, fine, great. Oliver, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this very important webinar, which I believe will contribute a lot to anti-corruption crusade in which we have also been working over the years as Clean Foundation. Like you have elaborately introduced what Clean does and how we got a little bit involved in this particular asset recovery management in terms of how it's applied in Nigeria. I won't spend time trying to repeat how we got to this point, but suffice it to say that all this whole arrangement was between the US government, federal government, and then the week of JC, a tripartite agreement that was concluded in 2020. And then we as Clean got involved 2021, and we are given the the contract after due process to be the civil society organization that should monitor the application of the Abacha tree loot, which was a total amount of approximately 312 million US dollars. And we at that point, when we came in, it was to fulfill certain GIFA principles. One, which says that there must be transparency and accountability. And then again, the second aspect was the principle 9, which has to do with the preclusion of those who are actually perpetrators of this crime. And finally was the principle 10, which has to talk about the issue of including non-governmental organization in terms of the application of the recovered Abacha tree loot. I want to say for us in Clean, we set out to actually ensure three principal objectives, which was to ensure appropriate utilization of this particular recovered assets, and also to ensure that there is a human rights, a respect of human rights in Nigeria while implementing this particular project. Like you said earlier on, it was a very definite focus to apply it into what we regarded in Nigeria as three legacy projects, which is the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, and then the second Niger Bridge, as well as Kano-Abuja Road. And I want to say that in the midst of it was for us to ensure that this was properly applied. Let me touch very quickly about the governance system of this particular recovered asset and the application of it. There were principally three government institutions that were in the forefront of ensuring that these assets were recovered and properly applied. One was the Federal Ministry of Justice, which had to do all the nitty-gritty of the processes of recovering this asset. The second was the NSIA, which is the Nigerian Sovereign Fund Investment Agency, who also has the responsibility of disbursement of this money. And then the third was the contracting ministry, which is the Federal Ministry of Works. In these three areas, the approach was to ensure that the issue of relooting does not happen and there are control, and that the governance system of this application of the recovered fund was properly done. And I want to give kudos to the Nigerian government for actually this basic arrangement also put. But the fourth run was the involvement of the civil society organization. And I want to say that practically this went a very long way to be able to bring back trust in terms of the application of the Abacha tree loot. And what did we do as civil society organization to be able to get this thing? We clearly defined our scope of work, which was also agreed as per the contract that we had. And we went ahead to carry out, number one, we were doing a kind of citizens engagement and citizens sensitization in the locations of this particular project interventions where the Abacha Loot 3 was being applied. And I'd like to also say that the fund recovered from Abacha 3 was part fund, not completely the total cost of this project. So what we did in terms of monitoring, there was monitoring visit, a quarterly monitoring visit to this project to ensure that the scope of work and the standard that has been prescribed as per the contract is being done. The third thing was also to get involved in terms of the procurement monitoring to ensure that the contractors has a very adequate procurement system that ensures that even in terms of contracting, that those who are perpetrators of this does not benefit from the discharge of this particular fund again, to forestall that there is no relooting of this particular recovered asset. And then the fourth thing we did was also a very high level scaling to the public about what is happening from time to time through our reporting, through various public engagement where we disseminate the information that we have received as civil society organization while monitoring this particular project implementation. And I remember situations where we had in the city of Abuja, as well as through linkages where people ask us and we have to make a affirmation that this thing we are there practically monitoring this thing. These were some of the steps. And more importantly, we also established a website which is still currently today on and is being referred to by the citizens of Nigeria when you want to get information as far as the Abacha 3 application is concerned. While monitoring, there's also something that we brought which was very, very innovative, was to ensure that along the line where this project, the fund has been, recovered fund has been applied, that there was a visibility signboard where the government writes and clearly marked that between this kilometer, this to this and that, and this in the project, this is where the money was applied. I remember that this were very, very defined. And when you drive across along this project today, you can find the signboard there still speaking, and you can also find the MOVs on our website because we took note of this. Again, I want to say that because we are down to the grassroots as a civil society organization, and the people has a lot of trust in the work we have done over the 20-something years that Clean has been in existence in terms of transparency and accountability, we were able to actually speak to the people to also understand that there is an ownership that they have to really instill in terms of maintaining the standard of this project where it have been built. And that again has to do with a kind of conscience and trying to ensure that the people, the citizens themselves, have the right attitude to this project that has been established. I want to say that in doing this, we also came to the point that we have to get a lot of evidence, pictures, videos, jingles, and that we put up there for people to really verify. I remember personally getting engaged with the people in the Southeast where you have the second Niger Bridge. And incidentally, a lot of them were very ignorant about the process, about what had been done. And I had to answer a lot of questions and to clarify these situations that are there. And today, I think I want to say that the Nigerian people, when it comes to Abacha 3 loot and the application thereof or the way it's managed, can really say that they can see evidence of what has been done. And I think that this is the way to go for us in Clean when you talk about application of these funds that have been recovered, because the tangibility of what we have, what the money has been used for, can easily be seen presently as well as beyond the present generation. Thank you so much. I know I have just one more seconds to go, but I want to thank you again for being able to speak straight to this paper and to say that this is a continuous discussion and engagement. And again, let me thank UNODC for being so magnanimous for bringing Clean to showcase what the little we have done. We believe that in future we'll have a more substantive engagement to actually bring this thing to fore. Thank you so much again, Oliver, and everybody on the line.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you in particular also for mentioning the Global Forum on Asset Recovery principles that were adopted some years back and that are providing an overall framework, essentially, of the ideal return and recovery of assets, and in particular the return. Now, let me turn to Jonas. Jonas, you are heading the Secretariat of the Échange Fund, a fund, as I already mentioned, that has been established by the governments of Switzerland and of Uzbekistan for the return of assets misappropriated. And as the court cases in Switzerland are being concluded, the respective funds are being returned to Uzbekistan through a fund that is administered by the United Nations, from which then projects are being funded for implementation. Can you describe the setup of the fund first and foremost, and what are the specific arrangements that have been put in place to ensure the transparent and accountable management and disposal of these resources?
Great. Yes, thank you, Oliver. Thank you very much. First, I was listening to Peter's great intervention, and it was very informative. And I looked at the banners behind Peter, and it occurred to me that the Clean Foundation is doing a lot of great work in Nigeria, but it also has a name that rolls off the tongue in the English language, which may not be said for our Ishonj Fund. So, but there's a meaning to the word Ishonj, and there's a meaning to the name of the fund. So let me start by explaining that. So the word Ishonj means trust in Uzbek language. And this is at the core of the identity and the purpose of the fund. The Ishonj Fund exists because Uzbek citizens need to see that the stolen assets are not only returned, but are also managed fairly, transparently, and for their direct benefit. So in terms of the governance structure, we are involving both governments, the Uzbek government and the Swiss government. We're involving the United Nations and civil society in all decision making. And this ensures that no single actor controls the process. Every governance safeguard, from independent oversight to communication, et cetera, is designed to demonstrate accountability. And in this way, trust, Ishonj, is not just a word or a name of the fund or a value. It is the starting point and the end goal of the fund. Restoring trust in institutions, in the restitution as a concept, and ultimately in the idea that corruption can be reversed as tangible benefits for ordinary Uzbek citizens. So describing the governance structure really quickly, at the very, very top of the fund governance structure, we have the high-level strategic committee, which ensures the political oversight and ensures alignment with the fund's restitution mandate and the national development priorities of Uzbekistan. Then we have the fund management committee, which is co-chaired by three institutions: the government of Switzerland, the government of Uzbekistan, and the United Nations. And this makes the management committee makes all the operational and financial decisions of the fund, and it ensures a balance, if you like, between the Swiss, Uzbek, and UN perspectives. Then we have a civil society advisory council, which includes, it's an opportunity for civil society organizations, NGOs, watchdog groups to have a voice in the process, and it reinforces the legitimacy and the public trust in decision making. Then we have a fund secretariat. I'm the head of the fund secretariat. We provide technical risk management and other types of support to the different bodies in the governance structure to ensure that they function effectively. The UNDP Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office, another name that doesn't roll off the tongue, MPTFO, is the administrative agent of the fund, and it guarantees, it's based in New York, and it guarantees compliance with the UN financial standards and rules. So this layered governance model ensures, as I said, that no single actor controls the process, and it minimizes the risks of corruption and nepotism, while it is designed to maximize the credibility and the impact of the fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Yes, and I think the fact that the terms not always roll off the tongue is maybe not an overarching criteria, but their meaning and their content is probably the most important. And I think on that one you have convinced me certainly that there's a good arrangement. Now, let me turn to Sayura. Sayura, you are chairing the Civil Society Advisory Council to the Ishonj Fund. And the principal purpose of the council is to provide an independent advisory function to the fund's management committee in the interest of the effective, accountable, transparent asset restitution to the people of Uzbekistan, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. And then the second purpose is to participate in the monitoring and evaluation of the fund and the programs and projects implemented with the funding provided through the fund. And then thirdly, to advise on the establishment of an independent whistleblower system to ensure public access to can file grievances, ask questions, and seek information. Now, in your own assessment and the assessment of the Civil Society Council, how successful have you been so far in carrying out these functions? And have there maybe already been any concerns raised by the members of the committee or members of the public as concerns the transparent and accountable management of the fund? Over to you, Sayura.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. In the beginning of my presentation, I would like to express gratitude to the United Nations Organization for Drugs and Crime for organizing this event, because for the Republic of Uzbekistan, the restitution institution itself is something new in practice. We did not have ever in our history of a new Uzbekistan. And even before, we haven't ever heard of such approaches. Only theoretically, we knew that there is such an institution of restitution or recovery of stolen assets, and we don't even have a law. And for the future, we propose to have such a law, because this experience that we are gaining now in Uzbekistan, I believe this will be a justification, a fundamental, a basics. Maybe not even we'll be having restitution, but this is a fact. We need certainly to work in the legal field. As to our advisory committee, advisory council, indeed it has been established after bilateral agreement between Swiss Confederation and the Republic and the government of the Republic of Uzbekistan. And in principle, in the beginning, we did not expect what to expect, really, because the role of the consultative of the council was not really clear. And when we gathered 19 individuals, 2 representatives of international organizations, when we had people who have experience in restitution, the composition, 17 people, were the representatives of civil society organizations, heads of NGOs, academia, researchers of the Republic of Uzbekistan. And in principle, they all are aware, theoretically, what is restitution, but what is factual, we did not know what was the role of ours. When we developed the feasibility study, we certainly missed some points, because within 2 years we have gained some experience, which allowed us to prepare now new amendments to the terms of reference, and because we're growing within this process, and by understanding the importance of the civil society organizations, both as monitoring organizations and oversight, we came to this point, and we all have our strong civil position, and it is very important to maintain our reputation. And we believe that the advisory council for the civil society should not be only the declarative body. That's why we, from the very beginning, started to monitor the whole process, starting from the tender.
Starting from bidding and storage and delivery and procurement of equipment. And we've corrected our activities in the monitoring. We started inviting our local experts with a very high reputation and who are the good specialists who participated in other processes for the procurement of equipment. And that's why I want to say that the monitoring started from the beginning, from the start of the process of equipping not only with equipping, but also the installation. So we, together with international members, for example, Mr. Patrick Mulzenberg, before installing, we've been on the site, to visit to see the state of the perinatal center before and after to compare. Of course, it was a huge difference, and there's monitoring and oversight from the civil society, allowed UN agencies also to be more active, and both all parties, both public agencies and UN agencies, they I think worked better due to this monitoring. And I want to say that I just want to provide some figures. If in 2000 for 1,000 newborn children, the mortality was 61 per thousand, 61.5 per thousand. Now, I've just requested the official statistics for 8 months, 4.7. That's the number, the mortality per thousand. And we actually see that those centers working, and we see a really tangible result. And we also trying to align with the strategy of Uzbekistan for 2030, and also SDG goals of UN. And regarding the feedback mechanism we are reviewing, and during the visits, we could, after the installation, we could talk with those who received those services. And I'd like to say that with experimenting, with attempts, we're trying to show the society and our people that those assets that were returned, they are aimed they target everyone. So every citizen of Uzbekistan would benefit, could use these assets. And we had some drawback. The outreach work was not perfect at the beginning, and there were many questions, and from people, from media, from bloggers. Why you're not covering this process, the work that is going on? It's not transparent, and etc. But then, so we, after some time, and we've developed website of the fund, and each our monitoring visits were highlighted in the medium. And also we've done a briefing in Al Malik City with the managing committee, and we've invited the media and bloggers. I think that we will continue this way. Actually, this unprecedented case for Uzbekistan, and the existence of advisory group and the return of the assets, that's a new thing for us, unprecedented. And we're the first, so we're trying. Of course, we make mistakes, that's natural. And but actually the presence of UN agencies and execution of the project by UN agencies, I think that that actually creates twice a load, because that's they face, and because that's a double responsibility. So thank you for giving me floor.
Thank you so very much, Sayora. Very interesting. You mentioned, and Peter did so as well, how important it is to communicate effectively with the public, to really instill this level of trust that we would like to see, of course, when it comes to the management and disposal of recovered assets. And of course, communicating the impact of this fantastic work that you're doing is absolutely critical in that point. So thank you also very much for sharing some of those statistics. And I think there was a last element which you mentioned, which I found really interesting, which relates basically to the question of legislating the recovery framework eventually. And I think it's very interesting to see that Nigeria exactly did that. They came up with the Proceeds of Crime Act after many, many years of using different legal frameworks, much more focused frameworks. They came up with this kind of like catch-it-all legislation, which also legislated actually the use and disposal, and not only of internationally recovered assets, but also and particularly of domestically recovered assets. So I think that's a very good a step in I think a very promising direction. But let me not spend too much time on this. Let's turn back to Peter. The asset monitoring system you established for the Abacha 3 return was the third attempt at creating a system that would instill public confidence. And what was the reason for choosing this particular arrangement this time around? And how did it take into account lessons learned from the past? Peter, over to you.
Once again, Oliver, thank you. And thank you, the previous speakers who have contributed immensely to this engagement. For Jonas and Sayora, thank you so much for all that input. Let me go straight away because time is not on our side. There is the previous model that was used in some of the previous assets recovered in Nigeria, which was the cash transfer system. And where Nigeria identified the poor of the poorest and start transferring 5,000, 10,000, and sometimes you call it the market money, where the officials have to go to the grassroots to give cash. And this happened, and I think that it brought a lot of distrust again and deepened the gap of between the people and the government, and whatsoever that particular model achieved was not actually convincing the people that there's transparency and there's accountability. So the Nigerian people had it in mind. It may be allegedly or because no investigation has not been done to say somebody is guilty of any crime in that model. But again, it gave them the lack of transparency, lack of accountability to the Nigerian people, because they couldn't see the tangibility of what was being done. And again, it came to the point that the data problem was also there, that where is the data? Where are the people who have collected the money, and to what have they deployed this money? This brought a lot of social complaints and social clamor that, look, government, it seems that this model is again turning around to become a reluting of the funds. And I think that this is some of the things that actually form the aspect of actually looking at the model that was used in the Abacha 3 loot, which was agreed that it should be applied to particular physical project where people can see it. And it was actually used also to doesn't the complaint of the various regions, because you find the selection was in the southwest, also in the northern part, as also in the southwest, which is the major blocks. There are other blocks anyway, which we can say we have 6 geopolitical zone here, which is very economic. But these 3 locations made it that the people saw what was being done. And I can say till today, the lessons learned from the issue of cash transfer, till tomorrow, people are still not convinced that those money went to the poor of the poorest or the poor people. And so this time around, there's a tangibility, there's something that can be seen. And again, like I just returned from Lagos, I still use the same road, the road that had been built And if you find along the trajectory where these things have been implemented or the project have been finished, you can see, I can tell you from Lagos to Ibadan, that used to take almost 4 hours or 3 hours because of the bad road. Today, you can, if you have a very good car and there's no obstruction, you can make that journey in just 1 hour. And you find a lot of ancillary industries growing along this trajectory. The same thing with the second Niger Bridge. If you get there today, I happen to have come from the Southeast myself, and I remember engaging the people in the Southeast that this project is one of the things that we must continue to give credit to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, because for so many years, it was in story, it was in paper, it was in promises, but the last regime before this ensured that this project was completed. We can give credit to government when it is not all bad. What I want to say at this point is that we are not where we are supposed to be, but we are not where we used to be in terms of asset recovery, management, and disposal of stolen recovered assets in Nigeria. Like Oliver clearly stated, Nigeria has gone a long way to try to use the same global principle to domesticate certain laws, like the POCA that they are in mention of. We want to begin as civil society to engage with government, partner with government, join hands with government to also ensure that the local assets recovered are also properly applied with transparency and accountability in Nigeria, so that sustainable development, which is the pivot goal for recovering this asset, is achieved. Because for us in Clean, we continue to advocate. I was in Addis last year, December, and I was telling the platform that my own opinion and the opinion of Clean Foundation is to continue to apply this particular project on identified projects. And again, in identifying this project, we must also go to the grassroots to ask the citizens what is their real need, not just to hand it over from hand down from. Community engagement is important in planning, in applying this recovered fund. And I think that this land, in terms of cash transfer, is also growing the effectiveness and the efficient management of asset recovery in Nigeria, thanks to the laws that are in place now, and we will see that those things are properly implemented. Thank you so much. I hope I have not taken so much time in making this second intervention.
Perfect, Peter. No, not at all. Perfect timing, perfect time management. Let me just quickly pick up on two aspects that you mentioned. That indeed, I think from the example that you have given, also the evolution of the types of use that have been made with from these recovered funds, I think it's quite evident that the choice of project matters. It is not replaceable. And the choice of project should probably also be informed by the level of I talked about the trust deficit at the beginning. The level of the trust deficit probably should be taken into account when you choose the project, because depending on how high or low it is, you can probably, or you should, choose different types of interventions, quite apart from the issue that, of course, you need systems in place that ensure the proper management, the accountable management, and that, of course, also are transparent and communicate well to the citizens and meet their needs, needless to say. So let me go back. Let me go back to Jonas, and maybe delve into something slightly more specific. So instilling and maintaining public trust is very much linked to timely and effective communication. We already mentioned that. But I would be now really interested to hear from you. What steps has the Échange Fund Secretariat taken so far, put in place to achieve this very difficult task? And what else have you planned to improve the communication on the Échange Fund?
That's a very good question, Oliver, and thank you very much. So first of all, we do, of course, have a communication strategy of the fund. It's a PDF file and people can go online and read it. So instead of walking you through the communication strategy, let me give you a few very concrete examples of how we implement the principles of the communication strategy in our day-to-day work. So the first concrete example I would give is that the fund has a direct ban on holding meetings in what could possibly be perceived as expensive hotels or conference venues, because optics and perceptions matter. So restituted assets comes from cases of corruption and nepotism. It would undermine the public trust if the governance bodies were seen in an extravagant setting. So instead, we keep our meetings in modest and functional settings, and that helps to reinforce the message that every cent, every dollar, every sum, which is the currency of Uzbekistan, is for the benefit of the citizens, not for appearances. And the second example I wanted to give you is from our comms strategy, is that the fund deliberately avoids showcasing staged photos of officials at conference venues with flags and microphones and signing ceremonies and these type of things. Such images are very common in institutional communication, like the UN and like governments and other institutions. It's very common, but we feel that they risk being perceived as self-congratulatory or reinforcing the very power structures that perhaps failed the public. Instead, we believe that true communication should not rest on these polished images. Instead, we believe it must be rooted in the impact for the people of Uzbekistan. So we need things that people can perceive, people can feel in their daily lives. We need schools with safe sanitation and water. We need clinics with modern equipment. We need babies, newborn babies, to survive, like Sayora mentioned. We need girls who can attend school without stigma. Only by showing these type of results that the people can feel in their daily lives can the fund demonstrate that the restituted money is being transformed into public good, and thereby we can close the circle of trust. So as Sayora mentioned, the fund has established a multilingual website, ishhonch.org. You can go and have a look. Here we publish all the key documents, the governance documents, the decisions, the financial reports. We also have some press releases that go out through the UN channels. We have all the equipment in the centers are branded with Ishhonch logos, so people can see where the equipment stems from, and they know that this is part of the restitution. We have posters and banners in the centers. And we have these human-centered stories that we now have a chance to begin communicating. So civil society, of course, in this whole process is engaged throughout, as Sayora mentioned, and you can all hear from Sayora's intervention how active the CSAC, the Civil Society Advisory Council, is. They engage with energy and a critical eye on all our fund activities. This is very, very valuable, not only from a sort of oversight and monitoring perspective, but also from a communications perspective. It amplifies the independent voices and strengthens the credibility of the restitution. But we're not perfect, and as Sayora mentioned, we can always do better, and we can take steps to improve. It is only now, in the summer of 2025, that we can actually demonstrate real impacts for the Uzbek people. It takes time to implement these types of projects. So now we have the results, and we are developing a more comprehensive communication strategy with more regular updates, with stronger social media presence, and of course we also have crisis communication protocols to help navigate the process. We plan to do more outreach in Uzbek language and use more visual storytelling, such as videos and infographics, to make sure that we really communicate broadly and reach people in all provinces and in all districts. So these steps that I'm describing to you now, I hope I'm answering your question, Oliver, is designed not just to inform, but also to build and maintain the trust that is the very essence of the fund. But just to be clear, it was a deliberate strategy and a decision made by the management committee to not, at the very beginning, begin publishing stories about meetings and signing of documents and making promises of projects and what they will deliver in the future. But now we have the results, and now you can expect to see a lot more communication from the fund. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jonas. I would like to get back to Sayura, because there's still a question that is lingering in my mind, and that somehow relates to these three core principles that were enshrined in the restitution agreement signed between Uzbekistan and Switzerland. Now, the first one was that the restituted funds shall strengthen the rule of law and fight impunity. So a general sort of like principle around promotion of good governance. And then the second one, much more concretely, said that the parties shall ensure that the funds are not at risk of being misappropriated again. And then finally, very specifically, all steps should be taken that the fund benefits neither the persons whose assets had been forfeited or who were involved in the commission of the offenses or their heirs and associates of such persons. So I'm wondering what steps have been taken so far to live up to achieve those principles, and what, if any, additional steps you would consider as potentially useful, Sayura?
Very good question, Mr. Oliver, because we also thought about this together with the advisory council members. And last time when we had a conversation with you, I said that if the members of advisory council for the civil society will not be involved in the negotiations process to identify what projects must be implemented in a country at the earliest stage, that means that we will be just those who just say what has been said. It is obvious that the government has selected at the first stage to implement the first tranche in the healthcare sector because high maternal mortality, infant mortality, and cover education. All the members of this council are here, and they hear me, and we admitted that this is the fact which must be taken as a priority. But in any case, we think that the enhancement of the role of civil society, increasing transparency of activities, both of the UN agencies and the council, we need certainly to have the civil society organizations involved, because those people who work in the field, they work with the population on its territory. They know what are the issues, the challenges, and where we need to focus on. And our proposal to the terms of reference, so that we were attracted at the very first steps, was one of the steps that will eliminate any corruption schemes or other violations. As to the rule of law, strengthening of rule of law, as it has been said in the core principles of the bilateral agreement, I think that the very fact itself for receiving the funds, the stolen funds, the restitution institution establishment, that shows the fact that the justice is here and is restored, and the further steps that we account on the activeness of civil society, that shows that we are moving in the right direction. And this team now is the very team. I will not be saying high-fly words, but we have the best representatives of the civil society. Not me. I'm a young representative of the civil society organization. I'm working since 2015, but people like Naziva Kamalova, Shamil Mudarisevich Azianov, they are our golden fund of the civil society. And indeed, we are growing in the process. In general, speaking in general words, and all those proposals. I will not be covering all the proposals that we have submitted to the committee on the terms of reference development. This is increasing of our authorities, of our powers, starting negotiations, involving us into the negotiations at the very early stages, and some financial aspects. And I believe that in the future it will give us some positive outcomes. So this is briefly in a few words. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much to all three of you. I think it's really a good moment now to take some questions from our audience. And as you might have seen in the chat, there's quite a number of those. So I want maybe to start with you, Jonas. There is a question coming from Transparency Uzbekistan. And the question is of how are the priorities for the allocation of the returned assets determined? Determined, I think, is the right English word. I apologize. Go over.
Yes, very good question, of course. So as I highlighted in my interventions previously, we currently focus on health and education. So we focus on the social sector of Uzbekistan, and we have a strong anti-corruption component that goes across all these projects. But our two thematic priorities for the fund currently are health and education. And these thematic priorities stem from the resource allocation strategy of the fund. The resource allocation strategy, it works in the way that when as you said, Oliver, in the beginning, as the criminal cases in Switzerland conclude, the funds are moved to the administrative agent in New York, the MPTFO, and the management committee then comes together and designs a resource allocation strategy for how that tranche will be used. And this resource allocation strategy is developed. The thematic priorities are set by the management committee. It then goes back to the UN CT, the results groups of the UN, to help shape the resource allocation strategy. It is then approved by the management committee, and it has to go all the way up to be endorsed by the high-level strategic committee. So you have many layers. Of course, civil society is also consulted in the process. And in fact, I was just talking to Sayura yesterday about the fact that we need to develop a new resource allocation strategy because we have already programmed the first one. $87 million has been allocated for health and education. And now is the time for us to begin thinking about the next resource allocation strategy. So very soon, the management committee will be meeting with the civil society council to begin discussions about what the thematic priorities should be for the next resource allocation strategy. And this will then inform what type of projects can be considered for the next tranche of the fund. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Another question, this comes from Nasiva Kamalova, and she asks Peter, what are the main lessons learned by those organizations that participated in the monitoring process and by your organization itself? Now, I think just for clarification, in the case of Nigeria, it is one civil society organization that is principally responsible, but of course they involve the local communities, as Peter had explained. So Naziva would like to know what are the main difficulties encountered, especially during the deployment of these monitoring visits that you were describing. Peter, maybe you can shed some light on that. Peter, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, fine. There were so many lessons learned while we were monitoring this particular visit, and one of the issues is the level of knowledge, very low level of knowledge of the people as far as the interventions of government is concerned. And again, like Jonas said, communication, strategic communication, developmental communication is required by the government. We discovered that government may be doing a lot, but the people don't know. And that means that the government need to step up their level of engagement with the citizens, because the citizens in Nigeria see the government so far away from them, despite the fact they may be located in the same city, by the parameters in which the government officials parade themselves and all the rest of them. And we in the civil society have begun to say that, look, if you are modeling a certain things, you need to practically show it by your life, so that the people you are talking to can understand that this is exactly the reality of things on ground. So while we went about monitoring, the people still feel that the government is not doing anything, while we were trying to convince them that this is something that's going to last. And again, that brings out the aspect that sometimes, because the formulation of this government intervention did not start from the grassroots, people seems to have some other focus on where their needs are than what the government is providing. And that makes them that when these things are provided, they don't take ownership and also see the value in what have been delivered. I tell you, for example, like the second Niger bridge, a gigantic project. I watched that bridge pillars come out of the water, and today is there. Great work that was done by the contractors. However, because of the level of poverty and the people not really feeling that the government is so close to them, this thing seems to be in danger of pilfering, of people taking away some parts of it and all the rest of them. And this is again where we continue to advise the government that after providing these things, sustainability of these things and to continue to contribute to the development of Nigeria need a little bit of more framework in terms of safeguarding. And that is again something that needs to be done. So not to just deliver the asset and leave it there. We hope that this asset will outlive so many generations. And again, so one other challenge that we also face is that the involvement of the civil society comes after the government has agreed on certain or so many things. And for me, we're recommending that along the value chain of deploying or application of this recovered fund, the civil society should be involved ab initio from the beginning of negotiations, from the beginning of determining where to apply this money. So because the civil society has the grassroots, because we work in communities, and if civil society are properly engaged or widely engaged, I think we'll be reaching a lot of goal in terms of asset recovery and the management of it. For us in Clean Foundation, it was a very good experience, and we are given the opportunity, we like to do it again from the experience that we have gathered as Clean Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think very, very interesting points. I mean, you made it severally that the people don't know, and I think we often underestimate of how much effort it takes from our side to actually inform the people. We often, I think, assume because we have said it, because we have put it on a website, because we have put out jingles that people absorb that information, but they do not necessarily. And it is our job to make sure that they do. So we need really not only to say something, but also check whether the message has been received. And of course, both of you made this point about the early involvement of civil society, that is you and Sayura. Now, let me move over to a different question, and maybe Jonas, you can help me with that. Because Sayura already touched upon it a little bit, But there is another question that comes actually from our colleagues in the ARIN WCA. So that's the Asset Recovery Interagency Network for West and Central Asia. And they ask what anti-corruption tools are being used to ensure due control over the implementation of the projects funded from the returned assets?
Well, that is a great question. And as a starting point, the principle, of course, in the restitution is that these funds stem from corruption and nepotism, and they cannot be returned for the benefit of Gulnara Karimova or any of her business associates or any politically exposed people in Uzbekistan. So there are a number of criteria that are applied when we implement our projects. We rely to a large extent on the safeguards and the due diligence mechanisms of the United Nations. So when, for example, we as the Secretariat do not do procurement of medical equipment for perinatal centers, for example, that is handled by UNICEF and UNFPA in this particular case of our first health project. And we rely on their expertise to conduct procurement in a transparent and cost-effective way. We do have, as Sayora, I think, also mentioned, we do invite civil society to observe the procurement process. So the Civil Society Advisory Council is invited to come and observe the tendering, the opening of the bids, and the selection processes, which I think is also a good way to ensure that there's transparency in the process and that the CSAC can assure themselves that the procedures and the processes are followed. Yeah, so in a nutshell, we use the mechanisms, the well-established and trusted mechanisms of the UN. I am not going to claim that these processes are perfect. I think we are well aware of the risks that comes with procurement, that comes with refurbishment, construction, and these type of activities. And so we are vigilant, and we are cautious, and we involve the CSAC as much as we can in the implementation of these processes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There are two more questions sort of coming, and I think I would like to put the first to Sayora. Now, the question is being raised again, comes from Transparency Uzbekistan. How can NGOs contribute to the awareness raising of population about the results of the fund? I think there is, of course, what we do, but then also how can we engage the broader community of NGOs in amplifying essentially the good work that is being done, but also if there's issues, also those should be, of course, amplified. Sayora, do you have some thoughts on that? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Thank you very much for the question. We've been thinking about it, and we're still thinking because indeed, those small briefings or coverage in the website of the fund, this can, reach the audience in the capital or who live in the regional centers who use internet. But for, let's say, ordinary people who live in remote areas, are not active users in the internet, of course, this is a problem. And that's why, for example, before also we suggested to engage NGOs, local NGOs in the regions, so they could maybe also agitate or promote this thing during the different meetings. For example, I use this. For example, if I go to the regions, not related activities related to the fund, but I try to any meetings try to add this information that we have this fund on disposal of returned assets, and I'm briefly talk about the project that certain stages were completed. And personally, I do it, but I think this is not enough, of course. And we think that the agencies need to think about it. Um, of course, there is some saving of the funds. Maybe use those funds to do the outreach works. Maybe do the some posters in the streets or other methods, and try to do the outreaching about showing the facts. So much facilities were equipped, and uh, just to provide the facts how those funds were used. Of course, we need to highlight the work that is going on. Otherwise, we will be just closed community. Many people seek information. For example, international media, they request information with different questions, issues. Of course, I try to explain it, but it's not enough. We have to admit it. UN agencies, together with ministries and agencies of public agencies, they have to highlight those topics broader, and maybe some the funds, partial funds, should be directed to ensure the transparency or outreach. I haven't talked about the work that we did regarding the amount for the public education. Due to our advisory group, for example, we stopped the project for the Ministry of Preschool and School Education, where they wanted to construct 4 schools because it didn't comply with the standards that existed in our country. Construction of 1 school, total budget is about $2 million, and they asked $5 million, and by the decision of our community, we have returned this project, and now they are reviewing, and this is WASH project. It's now a different project. So we also try to impact ministries and UN agencies to stop all corruption risks. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for your watchful eye. I think that's really the quintessence why civil society is so important to this process. Peter, the next question is for you. It comes from Muslim Mirza Jonov. And he's asking, what methods have been used in Nigeria to inform the public about the process of returning the assets and how they were spent? I think very much along the lines of some of the earlier questions we had also in the case of Uzbekistan. And in specific, there's interest about beyond the website. Were there press conferences? Were there press tours? How did you bring the journalists along? Yeah, anything that you can tell us with regard to your own approaches in that regard?
Yeah, thank you once again for that question and that area of this thing. And I want to say that we all know that globally, the process of recovering these particular assets always take a very long time. And during those times, one is that a lot of things I'm not sure of until you have obtained judgment and it's done. And it's a very long process. And but however, in terms of getting the people, it's not just the website. We had citizens engagement, we had sensitization forums, and again, there are press briefings that we've done in time past where we bring a lot of main media and so on. And even if you go to some of the social media handles of Clean Foundation, you'll find certain tweets when we do some of this. So the media, along the line, media were always involved. Even when we go for monitoring, we take a lot of photograph, a lot of things, and then we come back and harmonize with some other people who are also working, because in this whole chain of monitoring, there's also the the external auditor who does some of the aspect of the financial analysis and so on. But again, when these reports are there, it's published. And one good thing about it is that even the federal government of Nigeria, even in recent time, have begun to engage a wider civil society in terms of getting them to attend meetings where they give them updates and all the rest of them on what's happening. Recently, there's a particular recovery in which Clean is even invited to be part of the procurement of the next civil society who monitors that particular aspect, based on our experience of monitoring. So we continue to make this thing very transparent and open. Recently, there was a national summit on asset recovery and management in Abuja, which was a national thing. And Nigeria is actually trying to make this thing more open so that we can build trust and get it done. Like I said earlier, we are not where we are looking forward to be, but we have made a lot of progress, which I think other African countries will also copy from Nigeria. I remember when we were in the last December summit in Addis, a lot of people had to meet me to say, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? How to share with them from Mozambique, from some other countries across Africa. And I think Nigeria, we still have our challenges anyway. There are big challenges. Well, being a big country in Africa, the challenges are still very much enormous, but a lot of effort is being made. But again, we as Clean Foundation will continue to drive the issue of transparency and accountability in this direction of asset recovered and building. Let me say this in maybe I will also have opportunity of bringing my concluding statement, but let me say it this way. There's a lot of networking that need to be done, and within the parameter of Nigeria, some of us who have worked in this area are also together, trying to put our synergize together in terms of being able to support Nigerian government to push this thing forward and ensure that there's trust in terms of application of the recovered funds from all over the world. Nigeria has a lot to do in this direction, and we won't be tired doing this work. And again, thank you so much for being able to bring me to make this intervention.
Fantastic, Peter. And full disclosure, I think I already well, I don't want to use the term stealing, but I was already borrowing one of your ideas in terms of actually bringing together civil society monitors across the world.
Yeah.
People like yourself, people like Sayura, that have been doing this work and to share their experiences. I think that's actually a really interesting thought. So I will definitely come back to you in case this should be taken forward. Now, there's another question, and I think this is to you, Jonas, whether the Secretariat plans to raise public awareness about specific items, equipment services, works that are being procured within the framework of each individual project. I think you mentioned before, for example, the stickers that you're putting on some of the medical equipment, but maybe you can a little bit more elaborate along those lines.
Absolutely, of course. So look, if anybody is interested in going into the details of exactly what is being procured, exactly what activities are being carried out, the complete project document for every project funded by the fund is publicly available from the website. So you can go in and read. It's about a 30-page document which details every single activity, every single, every single deliverable implemented. We also have 6 months updates report and annual reports coming out of the projects. So people can use these reports and these documents to familiarize themselves with exactly what type of equipment is being procured. The procurement process itself is public. The tendering is done on UN platforms, the Global Marketplace, which is a public platform. So people can go there and see what is being tendered and what is being procured. But to the point, and this is actually something which only last week we were talking about, we are issuing a progress report in October. And in that progress report, we will list exactly what pieces of equipment has been procured so far. and we will detail it down to numbers and distribution across provinces and districts and perinatal centers. That, I think, will also help when Sayora and her CSAC colleagues do the monitoring. They know what to expect to find in those centers. And can I just put in another piece of information here? All the Civil Society Advisory Council members of the fund have been issued with ID badges, and they have the right to go unannounced to any project site and conduct independent monitoring. So they don't need to go with us. They also are more than welcome to go with us, but they can also go on themselves and go and check and see if the equipment is there. Go and check that the equipment is available for free for the people of Uzbekistan. And in doing so, this complete exhaustive list of the equipment, I think, will be very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very, very much. And thanks a million, both to the three of you for answering the questions, and of course for all the colleagues that have been joining us, the friends that have been joining us to pose those questions. Now, I would like to start moving towards a conclusion. And in order to do so, I would like to ask you, all three of you, maybe one sort of concluding question, and that is really, what would be your principal advice for countries who are in the process of setting up an arrangement for the transparent, accountable management and disposal of recovered assets? What's sort of the one thing that you would say really to watch out for? Maybe we start with you, Jonas.
Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, that's a really great question, which, of course, let me be very honest, this is the first time that the UN has been used as a mechanism for restitution. And of course, we hope to be able to do this well and to replicate this in other settings. So we have lots of advice and thoughts about how to do this even better in the future. But there's one, you asked, what would the advice be? There's an old proverb that says, trust is built slowly, but lost quickly. And an Uzbek colleague actually came to me yesterday and said, he gave me another version. He said, trust is earned step by foot, but it drives away in a Ferrari. And I think we will continue from our side to slowly, step by step, restitute the funds for the benefit of the people, and we will keep our costs low. We will avoid Ferraris. We will avoid big meetings in luxury hotels, and we will avoid self-congratulatory promotion. And instead, we will focus on deliver and improving education and health services under the first resource allocation strategy for the people of Uzbekistan through these well thought out UN projects implemented with strong independent civil society monitoring. And we will continue, I promise you that, we will continue to learn and continuously improve as we go along. For us, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. With an anticipated capitalization rate of $100 million a year, it could take us 9 to 10 years to deliver on our promise of restitution. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Same question to you, Peter. What is your one piece of advice?
Well, thank you so much for this concluding statement. For me, a lot is involved. Let me connect to Jonas' statement he made just before the last statement. It is not a sprint. It's a very long race. It's a long race. And any country or anybody who want to involve in asset recovery and management, as well as the application locally, must know that it's not something you can achieve overnight. It takes a lot of process, like I said, globally, and it takes you need resilience, and you need a framework to be put in place, and you need also continuous reviews of your application and approaches or strategies in terms of getting the goals and targets, objectives that you have set in terms of asset recovery. Again, you must also be people-centered to know that this thing at the end of the day should actually achieve the goal of sustainability. And that is where we at CLEAN continue to advocate that the recovery fund should be applied to things that people can see. Evidence don't lie. You know, when you bring evidence, if you go to the court, they ask you what is the evidence, and if you don't have substantive or adequate evidence, you will lose the case, no matter how righteous or how good you are. So there's the need for evidence. Let's not put this recovered asset in elusive, intangible things. Let's put it in something that will outlive us, outlive the generation that actually recovered this asset. That's the way a nation can be built. So anyone getting into this, or any country getting into this, must know that there are also many stakeholders that are involved. It's not just one-sided, and nobody has a monopoly of knowledge or how to get it done. So we must continue to collaborate, must continue to network, and that's what I was saying earlier on, that some of us who have worked in this area in Nigeria, ANEJ and Center for Africa, about 3 of us, we worked together. Even in the publication of the thing we did it together. And I've also been involved in other people's validation of their data and so on and so. So we need to collaborate. Again, let me say this, that at the global level, there's a need to continue to see how we can ease the process of asset recovery. One of the pains of the Nigerian people and the civil society is that many a times the countries in where these things are taken away and are claim to be righteous, where the countries where they have been stolen from are painted as what do I call it now? As thieves and as robbers. But again, this asset went and stayed in countries for so many years. I think that at the global level, we need to also begin to hold countries who harbor some of these stolen assets. My advice is that we all are in this business together. We must collaborate. We must work together. We must continue to drive until we see that corruption is stamped out of the globe from country to country. And I think we can share a lot of experience. Like Oliver said, it's important that a global platform should also continue to be provided where some of us can come and share from African countries and from other Latin America, name it, everywhere. I know that this is a global pandemic, and we need to really, really tackle it and continue to get strategies to solve this problem. Again, I want to thank all my co-facilitators on this platform, Sayura, Jonas, quite interesting listening to you. Oliver, once again, thank you, and you and your team continue to do well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter. Sayura, you have the last go at this question, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. First of all, in conclusion, I would like to express to you and your team my sincere gratitude for organizing this webinar today, because from the point of view of sharing ideas is very useful. Nigeria's experience, as Peter shared his experience, Jonas, who has a rich experience. We also accumulating drop by drop our experience. It is very useful to elaborate some single mechanism for the future. As to the future, I am an optimist, and I believe that our civil society, who is today different from what we had dozens of years ago, it will be robust and strong in maintaining rule of law, and I believe Jonas will convey to the management that when we receive the second tranche, it would be good if the members of advisory board will be advisory council will be participating for the benefit of the the people of Uzbekistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much to all 3 of you. It's really interesting to see how countries are finding different ways to build, to regain, and to maintain public trust in the management and use of recovered assets. And they all seem to struggle with the reality that, contrary to the famous quote of Roman Emperor Vespasian, that money does not smell, the proceeds of corruption remain tainted. And it requires an extra effort, not only to protect them from relooting, but also to prove to the public that everything is really being done to overcome the corruption of the past and to chart a new course, one of accountability, transparency, and of integrity. Now, with that, we are coming to the end. Please do not miss to join UNODC and our colleagues at ARIN WCA on Friday in 2 weeks' time, when we're going to be gathering for the 4th edition of our asset recovery webinar series. For the 4th episode, we will again be joined by our fantastic colleagues from the Independent Commission Against Corruption of Hong Kong, China. And if you missed previous episode, as of next week, you can find these on our website. That's www.unodc.org/ROCA. ROCA. That is our office, the short. With that, goodbye and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Sayora.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jonas. Thank you, Sayora.